become twice as persuasive as you are right now? What if you could learn how to tell stories, especially your story, in a way that kept people hooked onto your every word? And what if you could learn a few simple techniques that you could implement immediately to boost your confidence, charisma, and presence? That's what we'll be covering today with Akash Karia. A few quick facts about him before we get started. Akash is an introvert at heart. He is also a global keynote speaker who has spoken to over 180,000 people in 10 countries. His expertise has been sought out by clients from across the world, from executives at Gucci to managers at FedEx and leaders at Sony Pictures Entertainment. He's the author of 12 best-selling books, and his advice has been featured on Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and the New York Times. Prior to his work as a keynote speaker, Akash was the chief commercial officer at a multi-million-dollar technology firm. In our session today, Akash will lead us through how to become a more powerful and persuasive speaker and storyteller. This session is a very interactive one, so I would like all of you to bring your highest levels of energy and participate to the fullest. Now, one final fact about Akash. In his spare time, he enjoys lifting heavy weights, cuddling kittens, and dancing to Taylor Swift. With that, Akash, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Really appreciate that introduction. So I am so excited to have all of you in today's session. Today, we're going to go through how to tell your story and how to be a more confident, charismatic person. So I'm going to go ahead and project my slides on the screen. So if you can see my slides on the screen, this is the topic for today's storytelling and influence crash course. We have a lot to cover. So the first thing that I want to do is this is going to be a very interactive session. I'd love for you to think about the answers that think about the questions that I'm asking you. And if you can, just use the hashtag ATTExtern and drop your answers in whatever chat box, whatever platform you're viewing this from. First thing that I want you to consider is this. How would you rate your storytelling and presentation skills when you have to speak in public? Whether that's giving a public speech, whether you're in a job interview, how would you rate yourself from excellent to terrible? Excellent, very good, good, not good, or terrible. How would you rate yourself? I'd love for you to take about 10 seconds and really think about that and be honest with yourself. Okay, everyone got an answer right there? Cool. Now, keeping that in mind, the goal and the promise of today's session is to make you twice as good as you are today. Does that sound good? Does that sound like something that you guys would be interested in? Now, let's talk about what truly separates influential communicators from the rest. I, like you heard, am an introvert at heart. And I always had a difficult time connecting with people. Growing up, I was bullied in high school. I had very few friends. And I was that kid who was always socially introverted and socially awkward. And so I spent the next 10, 15 years of my life studying why are some people more charismatic than others? Why are some people so much more influential than others? And what I came up with is a series of science-backed tools that anyone can use to become more persuasive, become more charismatic, become more confident. And so that's what I want to share with you in today's session. So diving into this, there was a very insightful study done at MIT. Now, anyone go to MIT? There's a professor at MIT called Alex Pentland, and he has this device called a sociometer. And what this is basically a Fitbit that measures your charisma. You wear it around your neck, and what it does is measures how much energy you have when you speak. What is the variation of the tone? What is the sort of movement and body language that you use? Basically, it's the Fitbit of charisma. Now, as part of this study, what happens is the professors invite a group of people like yourself, university students, to be a part of a social gathering. Now, you guys all go ahead, you're wearing this Fitbit, this sociometer, and you're chilling around, you're having a conversation with each other. And behind the scenes, the professors are tracking when you're in this conversation with someone, what is the energy level that you have, right? How much energy are you exuding? And then after that, they take all that data and they ask all of these students to give a business plan as part of a business plan competition. Now, You imagine have to present a business plan. So you've just finished this networking event. Now you've been asked to come in and you have to give a business plan as part of a business plan competition. Now, how many of you have ever given a business plan before, right? You've given a business plan in the past, or maybe you have one coming up. Let me know with a yes, no, or I've never given a presentation before. Use the hashtag ATTExtern. Let me know. Have you ever given a presentation before? No, you've never given one, or maybe you have one coming up, right? Where are you? Where do you fall in this category? By the way, where in the world are you tuning in from? I'm tuning in from Hong Kong. It is bright and early in the morning, so I have to make sure that I have my cup of coffee with me. Now, as part of this business plan competition that you're asked to present, everyone gets up, and obviously a business plan is supposed to be judged on logic and data, right? When you give a business plan, how do you judge it? You base it on analytics. You base it on hard numbers to see who has the best business plan. Now, here's what happens. Behind the scenes, the professors were able to predict who would win the business plan competition without knowing anything about the business plan or knowing anything about the speaker. Let me repeat. The professors were able to predict who would win the business plan competition without knowing anything about the business plan or knowing anything about the speaker. How? Isn't that interesting? Take a moment to consider. How can the professors predict who would win the competition without knowing what the business plan is? Because a business plan is supposed to be judged on data and logic and facts and analytics. And yet they were able to predict with 90% accuracy who would emerge as the winner. So I'll give you about 10 seconds. Wherever you're tuning in from, just type in your guesses in whatever chat box, whatever platform you're using. So you should have a bunch of answers by now, and I see a bunch of common ones include charisma, confidence, all of these variations. What did you answer? Now, it turns out that the one thing that made a difference, the one criteria that determined who would win the business plan was this one word. Can anyone guess what it is? It's got two E's in it. Again, hashtag ATTExtern. Can anyone guess what that word is? We'll give you guys 10 or 15 seconds to guess that word. What is that word? Cool. Did anyone get this right? The key word is energy. The one thing that made a difference was how much energy the speaker had. Look at this. It wasn't about the data. It wasn't about the logic. It wasn't about the facts. It was about how much energy the person had when they're communicating that information. And so when we think about presentations and storytelling and communication, we usually think that it is about what we say. But there's a second layer of language, this hidden layer of language that comes through in the conviction that we have when we present, in the energy that shows up when we speak. And that shows up in your voice, it shows up in your hand gestures. And the most energetic people are usually the ones that are seen as most persuasive and seen as most confident and seen as most charismatic. Right. Just as a side note, who is the most charismatic person in Hollywood right now? Who is the most charismatic person in Hollywood right now? Anyone have any guesses? Now, did anyone guess Will Smith? Because I think that he is by far one of the most charismatic people right now. And when you look at any one of his videos, in any one of his interviews, you'll notice that he's the most energetic in the group. He's the one who laughs the loudest, and he's the one that uses the most expressive hand gestures. So energy is the key to persuasion. I want you to really think about that, because how often do you pay attention to the energy levels that you have when you speak? Now, I want to give you one more piece of evidence, one more piece of proof, and this is a study that was done at Cornell University. Now, at Cornell, there's a professor by the name of Stephen Ceci. This guy's been teaching the exact same course for 20 years. 20 years, exact same course. And one day he decides to conduct a very fascinating experiment. In the US, you have 2 semesters, you have fall and you have spring. Now, we'll call them semester one and semester two. Now, in semester one, the professor delivers the exact same lectures, the exact same textbook, and the exact same way that he's always delivered them for the last 20 years. Nothing changes. Now, in semester two, he does something different. In semester number two, he decides to use the exact same lectures, exact same textbook, exact same content, but he consciously decide to be a bit more. Guess that word. What is that word? In the second semester, the one key difference was he consciously decided to be a bit more energetic. That's it. He decided consciously that he was going to make a bit more of an effort to be energetic when he speaks and presents his lectures. Now, at the end of the program, the students are asked to fill out a questionnaire, as most of you do when you finish your lectures. Now, in this questionnaire, there's a bunch of questions. One of those questions, a variation of that question is this one, which is how enthusiastic was the professor? How enthusiastic was the professor about this class? Now, should there be a difference between the 2 semesters? Yes or no? Should there be a difference? Yes, because obviously he was more energetic in semester number two, and therefore he had higher levels of energy, and he was rated as being more enthusiastic. Makes sense. Very simple, very obvious question. All right. Now look at the second question. The second question was, how knowledgeable was this professor on this given topic? How knowledgeable was this professor on this given topic? Should there be a difference between the two groups? Should there be a difference? Yes or no? Let me know, yes or no. Should there be a difference? No, because knowledge is what you know, right? It's the content that you have, it's the data that you have, it's the facts and the logic with which you present. Turns out in semester number two, where all the professor did was be a bit more enthusiastic. They rated him as being more enthusiastic. They said he was more knowledgeable, even though he used the exact same content, exact same lectures, exact same textbook. They said he was more organized. They gave him a higher overall course rating. And they even said that the quality of the textbook was significantly better, right? Everything was the same. And yet when he presented with a bit more energy, it turned out they rated him as being more knowledgeable. And they said that everything about the course was significantly better. So here's my first key takeaway for you, and that is this. You want to seem intelligent without actually being more intelligent. Just be more enthusiastic, right? Enthusiasm is the key to persuasion, is the key to influence, is the key to charisma. And in any social situation, in any presentation, the person with the higher levels of energy is going to be the one that has more of an impact on the group. Now, just as a side note, I want to cover this because most people, I find, when I coach them on presentation skills and storytelling, are not energetic enough, right? If you were to think of a scale between 0 to 10, where 10 is the most energetic you can be and 0 is not energetic at all, most people tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum. However, there are a couple of people that are too far on this other end of the spectrum that are far too energetic in that given situation. I'll give you an example. Very many years ago, I was invited to give a seminar to a group of yoga teachers to help them improve their public speaking skills. Now, in that room, we had about 20 students, and this yoga teacher got up. She was this lady with fiery red hair, bright blue eyes, tattoos across her arm. And it was late in the afternoon. All the students were tired, and they were sitting around. And this lady got up, and she started off that session with, "All right, everyone, I'm so happy to have you here. Great to have you. We're going to have an amazing yoga session." And all the students in the room went, "Is she crazy?" They looked down going, "Oh my God, we're so tired." There was a mismatch in energy. And so the key takeaway is when you speak, you want to do something that is called matching and mirroring. All that means is notice what level of energy the other person has when you get into an interaction with them. There are going to be some people and some audiences that are very, very energetic. They're very fast talkers, they're very energetic. And so when you get into interaction or presentation with them, you want to make sure that you match that level of energy, you mirror that level of energy, but maybe be one or two levels higher. Just that's it, one or two levels higher. There are going to be other rooms, other situations where it's more appropriate to have a more poised, relaxed, slower tone of speaking. Imagine that you're presenting to an executive, right? You cannot go in with a very high level of energy. In that case, what is more required is more of an even level of energy. So notice the level of energy that they add, and then try and be one or two levels higher than that. Does that make sense? Matching and mirroring, figuring out what level your audience is at with their energy levels, and then just making sure you're only one or two levels high. If you're too high or too low compared to them, then there's a mismatch and they're going to think that you're crazy. Cool. So that's my first key takeaway. And I want you to think about, what energy do you bring with you when you go into social situations, right? What level of energy do you bring with you when you give a presentation? What energy do you bring with you when you go in for a job interview? Because we don't think about it. When we're preparing for presentations and interviews, we really focus on the content, but not enough on the energy that we're going to exude in that presentation or situation. So what level of energy do you bring with you? Now, this is also very important in social situations as well. If you're in a relationship, like I got married 10 years ago, and what I realized is that the energy that I present in my household, in my relationship, is a very important factor in how good that relationship is, right? If I walk her home after a hard day of work and I'm like, I've had such an exhausting day, honey, and she goes, yeah, me too. We just lie down on the sofa, our relationship is dead. Whereas if I go in and I go, honey, how was your day? Just a higher level of energy, you can find that the interaction is a bit more meaningful. Energy is the key to pretty much everything. And if you take away nothing else from this session, take away this. Make a conscious decision to be a bit more enthusiastic and energetic. Cool. So, how do you use this? What if you're an introvert? How many of you would classify yourself as introverts? Where, as you hear me say this, you're thinking, right, Akash, this might work for the extroverts who have very high levels of energy, but I'm naturally a very shy person. I'm someone who's more reserved. I don't think I can step outside that because that's just not me. How many of you would categorize yourself as that? You would not believe it, but I am very much an introvert. Like I told you at the beginning, I was bullied in high school. I was very socially awkward. And I would much, much rather be at home reading a good book than be at a party. I would much rather stay at home listening to Taylor Swift than actually go out and meet people after the concert, right? So I'm very much an introvert, but one of the things that I've realized is that we all need an ability to be able to switch our energy levels based on the situation that is required of us. So there's a term known as ambivert, which basically means that you're able to switch from being an introvert to extrovert to being an introvert, depending on what situation is required. Now, this is a technique that I use, and I want you to do this with me. We'll do this together. Very, very quick exercise. Rate your energy levels on a scale of 0 to 10. All right? Imagine a scale in front of you, 0 to 10. 10 is highest levels of energy, 0 is no energy whatsoever. How would you rate yourself on a general basis? Take it, whatever number comes up in your head, keep it there. Now, the next thing that I want you to do is when you go into an interaction the next time, I want you to match and mirror the level of energy that the other person has, and then try and present at two numbers higher. This sounds like such a simple technique, and you won't believe how well it works. When I'm giving workshops, and if I had the privilege of actually being here with you in the same room, what I would do is I'd invite one of you to come up on stage and give a presentation or a story. And you deliver it the same way that you've always done. And that's what I get many of the executives who participate in my workshop to do. They'll get up, they'll deliver the presentation, and then this is what I'll tell them. I'll say, on a scale of 0 to 10, how energetic were you? And they'll tell me 2 or 4 or 6 or 7. Doesn't matter what that number is. That number really doesn't matter. Then I'll tell them, great, I want you to try and speak at 2 levels higher. If you were at a 7 before, try speaking at a level 9. If you were at a 2 before, let's double that and get you to a level 4. And I don't tell them how to be more energetic. I don't even teach them how to use their hand gestures, how to vary the voice. I just tell them speak at 2 numbers higher. And every single time, without fail, the second time they deliver their presentation, it's significantly better. So, very simple exercise. Just be consciously aware of your energy. Much like the Cornell University professor, there was no tactic, there was no technique. It was a conscious decision to be a bit more enthusiastic. Together so far? Are you guys finding value in this? Does this make sense? If it does, type in yes wherever you're tuning in from so that I know that this is still of value to you guys. Now, the next thing is, how many of you find yourself stressed or nervous or anxious before a big presentation or before a job interview? How many of you find yourself stressed, nervous, anxious? Now, wherever you are, you can type in A, B, or C. A means yes, I get very, very anxious before a big presentation or interview. B is a little bit, but I kind of got it under control. Or C is I'm cool as a cucumber. Where are you? A, B, or C? Wherever you are, just type that in and hashtag that ATT extern so that we can see your answers. How would you rank yourself? A, B, or C? I'm very curious to see your answers. I love that phrase, cool as a cucumber, by the way. So, when I generally do this, we find that about 60% of people say they're about B a little bit. Then we have about 10 or 20% that they're in the A range, and the rest are in the cool as a cucumber range. So, where were you? I think I have something that might be able to help you, and that is a research study that was done by a professor named Alia Crum. And this is called the stress test. This is how it works. Imagine that you are one of 50 people and you've been given $25 to participate in this research study. $25 to participate in this research study. Now, what's the research? It's very simple. You're going to give a public speech. But here's what makes it interesting. The audience is going to be unfriendly. They're going to be having their arms crossed, rolling their eyes, not paying attention. They'll interrupt you in the middle and tell you that you're not speaking loudly enough or you're not making enough eye contact. So public speaking by itself can be a very, very stressful thing. But now imagine doing that to a very unfriendly audience. So you're given $25 to participate, you're one of 50 people. And then before this test starts, here's what the researchers do. They take this group of people and they split them up into 3 experimental conditions, right? The first group is the video game group. Now, this group is told, you know what? What you're going to do is very nerve-wracking. What we want to do is for you to go play a video game so that this group is basically distracted from the stress and anxiety. Now, when we think about dealing with stress in our lives, whether that's anxiousness for a presentation, a job interview, or we have some kind of stress that's bothering us, many of us try and do this. We fall to video games or we fall to distractions to try and get rid of that stress, to try and ignore it. So the first group is the ignoring group. The second group, this is also the ignoring group. So the first group ignore their stress or try to distract from it by playing an actual video game. The second group basically were told, you know what? Just pretend that stress doesn't exist. Pretend that you're not feeling nervous, right? Just imagine that you're not nervous at all. Just completely ignore all of those physical symptoms that you feel. Those butterflies in your stomach, those sweaty arms, just ignore them. How many of you have received advice like this? Just ignore it. Pretend it doesn't exist. Now, the third group was told to reframe that stress and nervousness. And what this is, they were told to look at the stress in a positive way. They were told that basically what this anxiety you're experiencing is a good thing. Stress is beneficial because what it means is that your body is gearing up for action. It means that you have higher levels of energy. It means that you care about this thing that you're going to do. And stress is something that your body is designed to help you with the task at hand. So think about when a mother, for example, you may have seen this on the news. Think about when a mother sees her kid trapped under a car, right? We hear all of these stories of superhuman strength where a 150-pound mother was able to flip over a car to rescue her baby. Why is that? Because the stress, the adrenaline, the cortisol, right? All of those produced enough energy for her to be able to lift that car off her because that thing mattered to her. So going back to the slide, the reframing is basically think of this test that you're going to do and the stress that you experience as something beneficial. Now, what were the results? What happened? You're one of these three experimental conditions. You go do the test. What happens? Well, it turns out that the students who were told to reframe the stress as something positive gave better speeches, they were more confident, and even though the amount of stress that they experienced in terms of the cortisol levels that they had was the same, they had another hormone in their body that was produced at a higher level. That hormone is called DHEA. And all you need to know about this hormone is basically, to simplify it for you without going into the details, it's the hormone that's known as a neurosteroid. It basically helps your brain recover from stress, heal faster. It's like a steroid from the brain. And people with higher levels of DHEA have actually been found to have higher levels of perseverance, higher levels of resilience, and a higher level of DHEA actually predicts higher levels of GPA in college. And all that students had to do to get higher levels of this was basically reframe the stress as being something positive. So in this group, they still experience the clammy hands, the sweaty fingers, the knot in the pit of their stomach. But when they reframed it, they actually gave better speeches. Think of the reframe this way. I want you to think about this. How many of you have gone bungee jumping? Or another question, how many of you would pay to go bungee jumping? How many of you would pay to go bungee jumping? And who would pay not to go bungee jumping? Who would pay to go bungee jumping and who would pay not to go bungee jumping? Let me know wherever you're tuning in from. Right? Pay if you'd pay to go bungee jumping, or not if you would not pay for bungee jumping. So when I do this, it's very, very interesting. What I find is that there's about 20% of people that would pay to go bungee jumping, and about 80% of people, surprisingly, would pay not to go bungee jumping. But what's the difference between fear and excitement? What happens? Your heart beats faster, your cortisol levels rise, your adrenaline levels spike, you get a knot in the pit of your stomach, you get sweaty palms, right? Your breathing gets faster. What happens when you're fearful? Exact same thing. What happens when you're excited? Exact same thing. Psychologists are now finding that there's no difference between fear and excitement. They're basically the exact same thing. They're a state of arousal where your body is geared up for whatever big task or challenge you have in front of you. So, researchers are now finding that the difference between stress and excitement is basically how you think about it. Some people will think of bungee jumping and think, you know what? That's really exciting. Other people will look at it and go, that's really fearful, right? So it all comes down to how do you frame it? How do you view it? It's the mindset that you have around this. And one of the things that I try and do before I give a presentation is, previously I'd say this. I'd say, yeah, I have this presentation tomorrow. I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous. And that was the language I used. Now, since I've learned this, I've changed it. Instead of saying I'm nervous, I'll say, yeah, I have a presentation tomorrow. I'm very excited about it. I know it's a challenge, but I'm excited that I get to do this. Or I'm excited that I have this job interview coming up. That simple change in language, that simple reframe completely changes the way that I think about it. And that helps me present and speak better when I have that presentation. Cool? So I want to give you one more example of the reframe. And this was a study done on students that were about to sit for the math portion of the GRE. So if any of you are going to sit for the math portion or any kind of test, this is going to be very helpful for you. So in this one, researchers took a group of students that are sitting for the math GRE. They tell half the students that anxiety is a positive thing, that the anxiety that you experience is actually a good thing. The other half are not told that, they're part of the control group. And then at the end, it turns out that the students who were told anxiety is a positive thing, actually scored higher on the GRE. Think about that. Just because they reframed it, they scored higher on the GRE because their mindset around this changed. So, how do you apply this? What I want you to do is the next time that you're feeling stressed or anxious or nervous, I want you to reframe that from anxiety to excitement. Instead of feeling that you're stressed out, think of the stress as something beneficial. Are we together so far? Does that make sense? So, how do you apply this? I want to give you one thing that you can use to apply this right away, and that is this. But I want to go into a different domain that talks about building habits. So let's for a second just move away from presentations and talk about exercise. How many of you would like to build the exercise habit? Who would love to be able to exercise more, be more active, go to the gym, work out more, right? Eat healthier. What is the secret to creating lasting habits? What is the secret to creating lasting habits? I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. Okay. So, as part of this particular research, the researchers took a group of women who wanted to lose weight and they split them up into a number of different groups. One of those groups was the tracking group. This group was simply told, hey, you want to exercise more. All we want you to do is go ahead and track when and how often you exercise and then report back to us so that we can see how and when you exercise. That's it. That's a simple instruction. Just track when and how often you exercise. The second group was the motivation group. Now, this group had a speaker come in who talked about the benefits of exercise. They talked about the disadvantages and the harm that you do to your body if you don't exercise. So, right? So, the pleasure of exercise and the pain of not exercising. So, trying to increase their levels of motivation. And then at the end of those two groups, the researchers monitored what percentage of people were still working out several months later. So, in the tracking group, the group that was told to write down when and how often they exercised, 39% of that group was still exercising, right? Not bad, not too bad. In the motivation group, 39% of the group was still exercising. The motivation made no difference whatsoever. So many of us think that motivation is the key to success, and yet it's not motivation. Motivation is very temporary. Someday you feel like doing it, someday you don't. I can motivate you all I want, but as soon as you leave this session, right, your motivation levels will drop because you have so many things going on in your life. And it turns out that motivation is a myth. Motivation is not something that's permanent. Motivation is temporary. It's kind of like a sugar rush that you get from eating candy. It's great in the moment, but after that, it's going to fall down. However, there was one group that succeeded really well, and this was the if then group. Now, what was the if then group? This group was very simple. This group was told, we want you to make an if then plan. And this is how it works. Write down if then. If it is Tuesday at 7 p.m., then I'll go to the gym and exercise for 30 minutes. Or if I have just finished taking a shower, then I'll do one push up. Or if I have just uh, completed my if I've just completed brushing my teeth, then I'll do 5 squats. So if trigger, then action. That's the simple formula. What percentage of the if then group was still working out several months later? Let me know your answers. We'll go ahead, throw that up. I'm very curious to see what answers you have. What percentage of the if then group was still working out several months later? Okay, cool. So, what do we have? Most people guess around 39%, 50%. Did anyone have anything higher than 50%? 60%, 70%, 80%? This was the actual answer. I'll leave that on the screen just for you to feel the shock factor. 91% of the if then group was still working out several months later when they used an if then strategy. If then is one of the most scientifically proven techniques for creating new habits. You take something that you already do, a trigger that exists in your environment, Then you add on your new small behavior and you're more likely to do it. 91% of the if then group was still working out several months later. So I love this because you can apply this in so many different areas. And the way that you can apply this right now, apart from exercise, is this. If I'm giving a presentation, that's the trigger. I'll increase my energy levels by 20%. I had a client of mine that did this. He was an executive at a pharmaceutical company. And this was the statement that he came up with. 2 months later, he wrote to me and he said this. He said, Akash, you won't believe it. I walked into my meeting. Usually, most of my staff don't pay attention to me. I'm sort of ignored by my own staff. However, this time around, when I used the statement, I increased my energy levels by 20%. Everyone sat up and took notice. My boss even came up to me afterwards, patted me on the back, and said, well done. I don't know what you did differently, but you seem a lot more confident just because of using this if then statement. So, what's your if then statement? It doesn't matter what it is, but take a moment right now to create an if then statement for your energy levels. If I'm in a job interview, then I will increase my energy levels by 2 points, go from 4 to 6, whatever that is. Do that for yourself right now. Create that if then statement. Another version of this is if you're feeling anxious. If I'm anxious before an interview, then I'll remind myself that it means that my body is giving me more energy and I can channel this into excitement. So reframing the stress or anxiety into excitement. Create an if then statement for that. I'll give you guys about 10 or 15 seconds to really think about this because I don't want you to just listen to me. I want you to actually apply this and do this for yourself. So I'll give you 10 or 15 seconds to actually think about your if then statement. Awesome. Now, final portion that I want to get into. When I was putting this presentation and masterclass together, I was thinking about what are those 2 or 3 techniques that I think would have been most valuable for me when I was just starting out in my journey, when I was just starting out in my career. The first one by far was energy. That energy is the key to everything. That 0 to 10 scale, going from number 4 to number 6, number 6 to number 8, consciously making a decision to be a bit more enthusiastic has been found to make you more persuasive. We've seen that with the Cornell University example of the professor who is rated as being more knowledgeable. We've also seen that with the MIT example, where the sociometer predicted who would win the business plan competition without knowing anything about the business plan or knowing anything about the speaker. And it doesn't matter if you're an introvert, all you need to do is match and mirror the energy level of your audience and then increase by 2 levels. That's it. I also thought about what else would be interesting, what else would I have loved to know. And one of the cool things that I have learned is reframing stress. Anxiety and stress and nervousness are actually good for you. And so when you feel yourself getting nervous, feeling anxious, reframe that nervousness as excitement. We've seen this in 2 examples. We've seen this in the study where people were split into 3 experimental conditions, and the group that was told to reframe the stress as excitement or as something that was good actually gave better speeches. We've also seen this with the example of um, the GRE math students, where the students who reframe the anxiety as something good for them perform better on the math portion of the GRE. Now, the third thing that I want to leave you with is storytelling. Storytelling is one of the best ways to persuade people, it's one of the best ways to influence people. And I want to just touch upon this and give you a couple of tools on this. So, what's the structure of a great story? I'd love for you to take about 5 or 10 seconds to really think about what is the structure of a great story. When you're asked to tell your story, why did you choose to be in this profession? Why do you do what you do? Why does your company exist, right? If you're asked anything about yourself, what is the story that you will share? Now, what makes a good story a good story? Well, for this, I want to turn to Warby Parker. How many of you know Warby Parker? It's the eyewear brand. They make glasses. And what I love about Warby Parker is if you go on their website and you look at their About Us page, what do most companies have? Most companies have very boring statements about why they exist. It'll be something like our company was founded in 1952, after which we grew to 5 locations, and then we expanded to 20,000 employees, and we make this much revenue. And then we moved on to this really boring, dull about us page that makes you want to stab yourself, right? Warby Parker does something different. Warby Parker has this story. So for this, I want to bring Ashley to read this story for us. So Ashley, if you can just go ahead and read this for us.
Every idea starts with a problem. Ours was simple. Glasses are too expensive. We were students when one of us lost his glasses on a backpacking trip.
All right, so notice this right now. We start off with the world as it is. The world right now sucks. What's the problem? The glasses are too expensive. And so in every single story that you have, there's going to be a problem statement that the person presents. So the next part of the story.
The cost of replacing them was so high that he spent the first semester of grad school without them, squinting and complaining. We don't recommend that. And the rest of us had similar experiences.
Now, this is where the part of the story where you take the character and the problem that you're experiencing and you intensify this. Notice the specificity of this, right? We spent the first semester of grad school squinting and complaining, right? So you can see that, and they're making it feel like it's a very big problem. They're taking basically a knife and turning it around so that you really feel the pain associated with having glasses that are so expensive you can't afford them. And so this is really building empathy. So in any good story, you're going to have a problem, and then the problem escalates and amplifies. Now, moving on to the next part of the story.
So it turns out there was a simple explanation. The eyewear industry is dominated by a single company that has been able to keep prices artificially high while reaping huge profits from consumers who have no other options.
Okay, so this is the part of the story where we go from the problem and now we're going to transition into a solution. We're moving from the world as is, the status quo, into a better world. We're having this transition from the world as it sucks to this world that is going to be better because of this product or idea or invention that you have.
So we started Warby Parker to create an alternative.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Very well read. Very good storytelling right there. So notice that story right there. We have the world as is, and then we transition into the world that is a better place because of your idea, because of your product, because of your service. And every good storyteller, every good brand, whether it's Warby Parker or Steve Jobs and Apple, have this origin and founding story that is a version of this. Now, the reason that I love this particular story right now is because it takes a very simple structure and it implements it flawlessly. So what can we learn from this? I'll go ahead and I'll show you. I want to take you through this and show you the formula for creating a great story. Now, you can use this when telling your story, or you can use this when telling the story of your company. And I'd encourage all of you after this to go on Warby Parker's website and click the About Us/history page and check this story out in full form. It's a great model to replicate when telling your story. So the first part of this is the complication. That is, you find the world as is. Sucks. What's the complication in this case? We have the complication that this person lost their glasses and they spent the first semester squinting and complaining. Now, after the complication, we have the transition to the better world. Now, in the transition, we end up with, sorry, lost my slides. 1 second. Just a second. Here we go. First part is we have the situation right now, the situation where the world sucks, right? We lost our glasses. Then we have the complication. That is, we escalate the conflict. And finally, we end up with a transition to a resolution. The resolution is the solution that you have. So you have complication, you have solution, situation, complication, resolution. Situation, complication, resolution. There we go. I got that right this time. Situation, complication, resolution. That's a very, very simple structure. And if you were to take this and make a very simple table out of this, you'd see that you have two contrasting aspects to a story. You have the first part of the story, which is the world sucks. And in this case, if I was to just go ahead and type out the bullet points, it is you have expensive glasses. Consumers are getting ripped off. There's no alternatives. And then that's why we started Warby Parker. Why? To get cheaper glasses so that no one gets ripped off and we offer an alternative. All that they did is instead of boring you with this in terms of bullet points, is they took a character, which in this case was themselves, and they put the character going through this journey, going through this problem, going through this situation, and escalating that conflict so that you really feel bad for the character. That is the key to a good story. A character goes through a conflict, and that builds empathy. So I want you to go ahead and take 30 seconds to think about your story. Right? When someone says, why do you do what you do? Right? Think about what problem you're trying to solve, or what problem did you encounter that caused you to go into the field that you're in? What's the problem that you've noticed in the world that you're trying to change? So, for example, if you're trying to go into, let's say, in my field, the training profession, right? What problem have you seen in the world that you're trying to train people on? So, in my case, the problem that I saw and that I experienced was that I was very shy, I was very introverted. And because I was shy and introverted, I had very few friends. So, I went on this journey of learning different techniques and strategies. And now I started my firm, my company, to teach people how to be more confident. So, I have the problem, and then I have the resolution at the end, which is the product or idea that I have. So think about your story. What could your story be? I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Cool. Now let me go ahead and dig even deeper because we have situation, complication, resolution. But there's another aspect to this, and this is what makes what Warby Parker's story so interesting. And that is how they bring the characters to life. They make the story very appealing and visual. It's almost like a movie that you can see in your head. So notice number one, every good story has some characters. So in this case, we were students, right? The word students is important. Why? Because it conjures in your mind an image of certain students. And then they say, we were on a backpacking trip. Now, it doesn't matter what comes to mind. For me, it is a bunch of students, right, wearing backpacks, going up a hill. Your image may be different, but you have an image in your head. You have a movie playing in your head. And that is what makes a story a story. There's an image that plays out in your head. So you got the characters, and then the next part is the conflict. Notice again how the conflict is escalated. In the situation, they lost their glasses. Now, in the conflict, we amplify that problem. So, you want to be very specific and give a couple of key details. So, they were in the first semester of grad school. Do they need to tell you that? No. Why do they tell you that? Because it makes it more specific so that you can imagine it in your head. It gives the story some credibility. So include one or two specific details about your story that will make it a bit more real, right? And then notice the words squinting and complaining. Why are those words important? It's because they allow you to see the story in your head, right? The squinting, you can imagine it. So it's a very visual word. So this is bringing the conflict to life by escalating it. Now, the next part of this is the spark. This is the insight or the idea that allows you to transform from the problem to the solution. It takes you from the world that sucks as is to a better world. In this case, it turns out there was a simple explanation. There is only one huge player in the industry that keeps prices artificially high. That's the spark, that's the aha moment. And then finally, we end up with the resolution. The resolution is where we have a change in the world, we have the change in the character. In this case, we started Warby Parker to create an alternative, right? That's the change. The world before, without Warby Parker, sucked. And here are all the problems that we experienced. And now we have a change in the world where Warby Parker is magically solving all of these problems. So that is a very, very simple explanation of what a story is. So again, I want you to think about your story and think of it in terms of an elevator pitch. When someone asks you, what do you do, or tell me about yourself, what's a 30-second story that you can use to illustrate who you are, what is important to you, and why you do what you do, right? Who's the character? Now, in this case, it could be yourself, right? if you have a motivation and a struggle that you went through, it could be someone that you know. Maybe you are in medicine because your mom went through cancer, and seeing the um, difficulties that she went through, that prompted you to be in the medical field. So the character can be you, or it can be someone that you know. What's the conflict? What's that problem? Escalate the conflict and include a couple of key specific details that make the image come to life in the listener's mind. What's the spark? The spark is that transition, that idea, that insight that allows you to go from the problem to the solution. And then what's the resolution? The resolution is a specific change in the character or in the world as a result of an action that you took. So that is a very simple structure for a story. And as you've seen with the Warby Parker story, a story doesn't have to be very long. It can be as short as 30 seconds. And in 30 seconds, if you have all of those elements in place, you can grab someone's attention and really keep them hooked and create a compelling reason and vision of why you do what you do. Does that make sense? So, was this useful? Did you get some value from it? If you did, what I want you to do is go ahead, wherever you're right now, use the hashtag and type in "oh yes." Type in "oh yes" with the hashtag ATTExtern if you got value from it, so that I know that this was enjoyable and valuable for you guys. So if you got value from it, let me know with an "oh yes." And if you want, also type in what was your number one key takeaway from everything that we discussed. Was it energy levels? Was it reframing? Was it the structure of a good story? What was it that really resonated with you? Um, if you guys type it in, I'll also come around to different platforms. I'll look at who interacted. And if you have any questions on there, you can ask them now, but I'll also be active on social media platforms and try and connect with you guys there. But if you got value from it, type in an "oh yes" loudly, enthusiastically to let me know that this was enjoyable for you guys. Now, of course, look, I understand that this is only a 1 hour crash course. There's a lot more that I want to discuss with you. I decided to choose these three things because they're very simple, they're very easy to implement, and there's at least one key insight that you can implement from this immediately. And whether that's the energy or the reframing or the storytelling structure, right? Hopefully that's sort of sparked an interest in you to want to learn more about this. I just want you guys interested in checking out more of this. And so I have a resource for you, and that is this. I have a book called TED Talk Storytelling. In this, I cover 23 different storytelling principles from the best TED Talks. I would love for you to have a copy, and I'm not going to charge you for this because you took the time to attend this call. I'm going to give it away for free. I'm going to drop a link to this in the AT&T LinkedIn group, so you'll be able to download it directly. I don't need your email address. I don't need your money. I don't need anything. This is completely free. It's my gift to you so that you can read more into this. It's the audiobook. Alternatively, you guys can go to my website, akashkorea.com. On there, you can download the audiobook, but there's also a 7-week storytelling course that you can get once a week, every single week for 7 weeks. And I occasionally send out some newsletters on psychology, communication, influence, anything that I find interesting. Or if you have any other questions, or you just want to ask me something about a personal situation that you're going through regarding communication, storytelling, influence, you can use my email, akash@akashkorea.com. Use the subject line ATT externship so I know where you're coming from. It may take me some time to get back to you because there's a lot of you and only one of me, but I will reply to every one of you. So if you want that, it's going to be on the LinkedIn group. You can also check out the website. Thank you so much for being a part of this session. If you have any questions, now's the best time to ask them, and we'll go ahead and see what questions you have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Akash, for sharing that amazing presentation with us. I know I definitely picked up on a few key things that I can't wait to implement into my next presentation. And I'm sure our students picked up on just as much and are probably looking forward to it as well. So I know that our students have been really active on social media, getting their questions in for our live Q&A. So if you're ready, I would love to go ahead and dive right into that.
Let's go ahead.
Awesome. So our first question is, thank you, Akash, for presenting today. My question is how to capture attention and deliver a memorable pitch when attending an event like a career fair, where recruiters engage with hundreds of students and you only have a short time to speak with them. Good question.
Very tough question. How do you capture the attention and deliver a memorable pitch? Okay, there's two parts to this. First, in terms of delivery, like I said, your energy levels are what are most important. So you want to make sure that your energy levels are higher than what you generally do in an everyday situation. What will really stick out to a recruiter is, does this person sound like someone who's credible? And does this person sound like they have a level of confidence? So make a conscious decision to speak at one or two levels higher than you generally do, right? That 0 to 10 scale is very important. The second part of this is, when you want to get the attention of someone, there's one part is what you say, but the other part is how you engage them. The worst thing that you can do is try and give a pitch to the other person when they're not interested. So if I met you for the first time and I start telling you, "Hi, my name is Akash. I run a company. I've trained 100,000 people. I've written 12 books." You're going to think, this guy's an idiot. I don't care about this, because you haven't built a level of rapport with me. The first part of building attention or building rapport with someone is to ask good questions. So before you go into your pitch, make sure you have two or three engaging questions that you can ask the other person. Take the time to really research the company. Take time to really research the person that you're speaking to, or the occupation that you're in, and go, "Hey, I've been reading up on X, Y, and Z, and this is something that I noticed. I would love to have your take or your personal experience on this." And then shut up and give them time to actually share their advice, share their story, share their experience. People love to be asked for advice. They love to share their story and experience. And so when you do that, you're building rapport by showing them that you want to know their experience. And then once they've answered, try and build upon that and have an engaging conversation naturally. This cannot be scripted out. You need to make sure you actually pay attention actively and build on what they've said. And then if you want, that's when you can transition into your pitch. Go, "You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I am really looking to get into this field. And this is what I've done. Make sure it's very, very quick, less than 30 seconds. Can you help me with X, Y, and Z?" But the keys, number one, your energy levels when you speak. Number two, forget the pitch. Don't try and sell someone on who you are. Instead, go in and build rapport by asking very, very good questions. You'll be remembered for the quality of your questions, not the quality of your pitch. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And as a recruiter myself, I think that's an amazing answer. I could not agree with you more. So our next question comes from Ben, and he asks, what's the best way to engage a non-technical audience with technical content?
Oh, some tough questions today. So this is really good. And I train a lot of IT guys. And there's something known as the curse of knowledge. If you guys haven't read a book it's called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. They bring to life the curse of knowledge. Now, the curse of knowledge is this. It's a very simple experiment. You have two people, right? They're in the same room, and one of them is told, and they get someone whispering in their ear and say, "We want you to hum this particular song," right? So they'll go, can anyone guess what that song is? Right? 90% of the time, the person who is listening does not know what the person who is humming is singing. It's because in our heads, we have the knowledge, we have the idea. So I know when I'm singing that song, I'm singing Happy Birthday. I have the tune in my head, I have the background music. It makes complete sense to me, right? All of this is so obvious. It's obviously Happy Birthday. But to the other person, they don't have that knowledge. And so when we communicate or we're humming, right, they don't have the same level of expertise, and they won't be able to connect with what's inside our head. Now, how do you solve this? There's a couple of key principles. Number one is, the best way to structure a presentation is not to start with PowerPoint. I find when I teach most technical professionals, they're asked to give a presentation. The first thing that they'll do is they'll open a PowerPoint or Keynote, and they'll dump down all of the information and try and organize the slides in a way that they think is logical. The best way to do this for a technical or non-technical audience is to actually start again with the questions in mind. So think about who is in your audience. right? Who are the decision makers? Who's sitting right there? And what are the 10, 15 questions that they would have about this topic, right? So if you're presenting an IT presentation, um, like what is a LAN cable? Why does a LAN cable matter? Why do we need to upgrade our software? What is the software? Why does that software matter? Like write down all of those questions that a non-technical audience would have. Then take the time to arrange those questions in logical order and then create slides around that so that you answer those questions. So the key principle in mind is number one, make sure that you think of the audience first, come up with a list of questions, and once you think of them from that perspective, you will have the right questions so that you can answer in a way that makes sense for them. The other thing that you want to do, second point to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you're not using technical jargon when it is not essential. So there's a time for technical jargon and there's a time for simplicity. So if you're explaining something that can be explained without the jargon and the audience doesn't need to know that technical jargon, then explain it in the simplest form possible. Think of you having a conversation with a friend who is very new to the subject. How would you explain it? Would you use those technical terms, right? Generally not. If the audience doesn't need to know what that term is, leave it out and explain it in the simplest manner possible. So 2 points. Number one, start with the audience in mind and think about the questions they would have. And number two, only include technical jargon when it is absolutely necessary. At other times, explain things as conversational and as simply as possible.
That's great. So I think we have time for one more question. And I think this one is a really great one, especially given our current climate and everyone being virtual. Jared asks, how do you tell a story and show energy via email, texts, or virtual formats, especially to a potential connection to an employer?
Okay, keep that question on the screen because I want to reconsider that. How do you tell a story and show energy via email, text, or virtual format, especially to a potential employee? Good question. So let's take all of the different mediums and divide them up. So first, it's very hard to connect via text or email. Um, and the reason is when we connect via text or email, your energy cannot be seen, your personality will not show through, your conviction doesn't show through. All people see is text. And we live in an age where we have so many emails and so many texts that people don't take time to read through properly. They sort of scan the main points. Now, because of that, when you're talking about email and text, what you want to make sure is you want to try as much as you can to match and mirror the language that the other person uses. Now, this is a very subtle technique. Let's say that someone writes to you and they always say, "Hi, Akash," right? "Hi, Akash," "Hi, John," "Hi, Jane," whatever that is. They use that salutation, "Hi." When I respond back, I'll try and match and mirror the language by using the same word. I'll say "hi." When other clients, for example, I've noticed will only use the word hello. So hello, Akash, hello, Jane, hello, John. In that case, I'll try and mirror back with hello in response. Another example, when talking about certain things, if someone keeps referring to um, their, let's say, they use a certain terminology, they keep using the word investment over and again, over and over again. What's the investment going to be? What's the return on investment? Like I know that word investment represents something to them. I'll try and mirror that language by using the word investment in my email as well. So it's very, very small. It may make a small difference, but it's not going to completely change the nature of the interaction. Ideally, you always want to be on a call with them over instead of text. If you're going to use email, keep the email short, try and mirror their language to try and build some level of rapport, but there is a limitation as to how much rapport you can build. Now, moving on from text to phone calls and virtual presentations. This is much better. And ideally, if you want to build some sort of connection with the other person, you want to do it when they can hear your voice and ideally they can see you. I can tell you this. When I talk to clients and they reach out to me for the first time to hire me for a workshop or training session, If we communicate via email, I know that my closing rate is very, very low, right? A very small percentage of people who contact me via email and we just communicate back and forth via email will actually end up doing business with me. If I can get them on a call, my closing rate increases substantially. And if I can get them on a video call, my closing rate increases dramatically. So all the time, what I try and do is I'll try and move the conversation as soon as I can from text or email into a phone call or into a voice or into a video call, because that way the same techniques apply. That is the level of energy that you have when you speak, your hand gestures, that sort of stuff comes into play. So, how do you build rapport? How do you connect with people? Email is very hard to do. You can try and match and mirror language, but ideally, you want to move to voice or you want to move to video. Video being the best one because then it's the same as being in a room together. Not as good, but the same techniques that we've talked about energy would apply to this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much for providing that insight for us. You know, I know our students are really grateful for it, and we've been really appreciative to have you here tonight. So I just want to say thank you for being here with us and for all the insight that you've provided us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to the team at AT&T. There's so many of you involved. I know we have a bunch of superstars that work in the background. They don't get all the credit for this. So thank you to everyone that's been involved. And to all the students that showed up, thank you for taking time to be a part of this session. If I can help you, you have my email address. Reach out, connect with me, and you'll be able to get the free download in the LinkedIn group or on my website. But thank you so much, and hopefully this is the beginning of a relationship rather than the end of one.
Yes, of course, absolutely. Have a great day. I know it's early for you, so we'll let you get your day started.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
For all of you out there, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I really hope that you enjoyed our session with Akash and were able to get a few things that you can apply to your future presentations, interviews, things like that. But on that note, we'll let you guys go, and we'll see you here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central for Kurt Steinhorst in his session on focus and work habits. Have a good rest of your day.